My name's Barber. I'm a photographer. I've been a documentary photographer for over 40 years. I was a member of a collective called Camera Work. I think we'd characterise ourselves as part of the counterculture of the late 70s. And through that I met photomontage artist Peter Kennard. And it's through Peter and his anti-nuclear work and his protest work that I started photographing demonstrations. I was never really a photojournalist, a news photographer. I'd never worked on the street. There I was, thrown out into crowds, which I'm not particularly fond of anyway, but because I was really determined to do it, I went ahead. And with the kind of energy that I had at that age, I went straight for it, and I didn't think about all these people. I just zoned in on what I wanted to get from those situations. And those situations were very varied, but I was determined to try and cross over, as it were, some of my discipline as a formal portraitist and bring that to bear in big crowd situations and photograph individuals, sort of what I saw as iconic individuals within those crowds, who to me represented a spectrum of people who were turning up for these events. At Greenham Common, I was at this event early in the morning outside the gates of RAF USAF, Greenham Common in Berkshire, photographing some of the women from Greenham Common Women's Peace Camp who were staging a protest outside the main gate where there was some building work going on, and they were laying in front of the construction work, and they were covered in these symbolic webs, and they were warned by the police that if they didn't move they'd be arrested for obstruction. And that's what happened. Another picture was a group of women from the peace camp invaded the security box at the front gate, and they just rushed it and climbed inside and locked the doors. And the sequence shows the police, again, completely unaware that that was about to happen. They got taken off guard, they were wrong-footed, and they looked like Keystone Cops. And I think it's got that sort of humour. The event itself was humorous, it was non-violent, it was highly disruptive. So, you know, that idea of disruption is a theme that comes through, I think, and a lot of their activities, the non-violent direct actions, were very provocative and disruptive, and that's great. There was a feeling of light touch policing. There's another good example of it where a group of women staged a die-in outside Downing Street. If you look at that photograph, there are cops sort of scratching their chin, adjusting their chin straps. You know, they're hanging out. There's 4 or 5 of them standing around there, and the women laying down. It's like, almost as if they're not there, they're just chatting away. So I don't think you'd find that now. So my access to that photograph wasn't impeded by those police. They were in the picture. So it's incredible. One of the pictures is of a policeman leaning on a van. Some women from Greenham Common were up on charges in the High Court for something, and this van arrived, and a protester, a male protester who was there, went under the van, and all you can see in the photograph is his leg sticking out, but the policeman couldn't see that leg. So you get this surreal juxtaposition, and I could never work out whether he's having a little moment and he's posing for me, or whether he just happened to be there. I think the biggest thing that drove people onto the streets was fear. As soon as people realised these Tomahawk missiles launched from a form of mobile unit that was going to be based in USAF, RAF Greenham Common and at Molesworth as well. And I think the fear was these things could end up anywhere pretty much. People were very worried about the implications of this. And I think the problem was that people didn't fully understand it. And once they began to understand, they got very fearful. Their fear and my fear meant that I was trying to record how they expressed themselves. And that was a very important driver for me to get me out there in situations that I wouldn't have otherwise put myself in. And so the fear led them to take to the streets, to do non-violent direct actions, and to do what they felt they could do. And some of those things were very straightforward. Just go on a march, stand in a crowd, you know, a big crowd. And other times they were much more risky. Hyde Park is obviously a place where big events did take place. Trafalgar Square, much more difficult place to work in because people are corralled into the square. But I took some of the pictures there, but a lot of them in Hyde Park. And there's a crowd shot in Hyde Park. I was working for CND. I was thinking, there's 300,000 people apparently, there were, we didn't know that at the time, in Hyde Park. I'd like to get a picture of them. There was a gantry right up the top, it was probably 50, 60 feet up. I didn't have a harness, but again, I was very determined. Up I went, took these pictures, and later one of those got used in this installation in Tate Britain. People really started to think about World War III and that we'd become a target because of all these USAF bases here masquerading as RAF bases. So people were very worried about this, and rightly so. So they took to the streets. And most of those people were middle class, they were educated and highly articulate. And one of the things I was trying to do, as well as photograph the actions themselves, I was photographing the folk art, the banners, the placards, the badges. Some of them are photo montages, they're brilliant things. And so I was instinctively drawn to these things. One of the earliest pictures I did was of a woman who's got this placard around her neck, and she looks like someone's granny, and she's absolutely fantastic and sort of almost monumental, partly helped by the way I photographed her, but she was something very special to me when I took that picture. A lot of this was almost like performance art, and people have mistaken some of my photographs for performance art. And you realise that, yeah, it is, but it's performance art with political meaning and conviction. And these are activists, they're not just posing. You know, it's not some vacuous thing in an art gallery. This is in the real world, and it's about real issues that affect people's lives. That's what you're dealing with, and I think that kind of reality gave it something, gave it a kind of edge and a motivation. This was something more to do with the whole global scene, with Reagan, Thatcher, and you know, the military-industrial complex, the growth of that idea that we need these new weapons of mass destruction. And I think that's that was a big motivator for people to get them onto the streets. On a day that Ronald Reagan visited London, and they closed off the junction at Bank intersection, a group of women from Greenham Common, basically a stage of dying, they laid down on all the roads. And if you look at the photographs, the police are completely wrong-footed. They just don't know what to do. They pull up in their fancy cars and they're pretty much scratching their heads. You know, there's that, oh, women laying in the road, what's this? And bystanders are taking photographs, and men in suits are walking by trying to ignore that, stepping over the bodies. So it was an absolutely brilliant thing, and the whole place ground to a halt. It was a brilliant, successful, non-violent direct action, and very few people knew it was going to take place. The protesters were able to express themselves in a lot of different ways, obviously. Sometimes through non-violent direct action, through placards, banners, and so on and so forth. But specifically, I engaged with certain people just the way it worked out, almost happenstance. And there's a picture of a woman standing on Westminster Bridge with Houses of Parliament in the background, which was a complete construction and goes back to my work as an environmental portrait photographer, where I staged it. I asked her if she'd walk over the bridge and let me take those pictures as a symbolic juxtaposition between her as a woman from Greenham Common Peace Camp with Parliament out of focus in the background. Going out there into the street was my way of trying to record things that were going on that I felt were really important. And I think people were very happy to be recorded and what they were doing, because that's why they put themselves out there on the street. That's why they were doing what they were doing. To me, the impetus was to make sure that these protests, this anti-nuclear movement, didn't get left out of the history books. I think that's the important thing. It was a sort of labour of love, if you like, a kind of dedication.